The budget battle has begun as top Republicans and Governor Tony Evers offer dueling messages on the two-year state spending plan. The state lawmakers are also about to launch a new audit looking into how and why education officials changed testing standards. CBS 58's Capitol correspondent Emilee Fannon and WisPolitics editor J.R. Ross explain in this week's Capitol Connection.
This week, the budget battle here at the state capitol really begun as we've had some time to digest Governor Tony Evers' budget, and more people are kind of talking about a series of proposals in them. This week, Governor Evers very touted his budget as realistic despite a 20% increase in spending in his budget plan, but he also is trying to sell it out and about with voters, doing these listening tours. And what he said earlier this week was that, hey, you know, if you're not going to like my budget proposal, talking to Republicans, it's going to be consequences at the ballot box. Meanwhile, we know this is a discussion that we hear every budget cycle, and you hear from people like Assembly Speaker Robin Vos saying, we're not going to really touch a lot of your priorities. But there's always some starting points in the budget, and what we want to focus on is the corrections plan. Yes, Evers wants to close the Green Bay prison. Do Republicans want to do that as well? Yes, but there's a lot of moving parts in this, and that's an area where we can maybe see some compromise in the coming weeks.
Well, it's kind of a question, does history repeat itself? So if you look at the time Evers has been in office with Robin Vos as Speaker, we've seen things like the Brewers Stadium bill. The governor proposed his version of what he wanted to do to keep Brewers in Milwaukee until 2040 at least. Robin Vos said, no way, we're not doing it that way. They took the plan, rewrote the entire thing. The governor is happy with it because it achieved his goal, kept the Brewers in Milwaukee. Shared revenue, which is state aid to local governments. Governor again proposed this big plan. Robin Vos said, we're not doing it that way. They eventually hashed out a deal. Governor signed it because it accomplished his goal. The governor's goal is to revamp the system and find a way to spend under release and keep Waupun prison in Waupun. Does Robin Vos and Devin Lemahue, the Senate Majority Leader, do they find a plan that achieves Evers' goals while not doing the way Evers wants to get it done? That's the big question. The big hitching point is going to be this. Evers' plan would reduce capacity of the overall prison system about 700 beds. Republicans will never go for that. Now, do they want to increase capacity? Because the governor will not go for that. He has said before he wants to not increase capacity. So there's that sticking point. Where do they find a compromise on that key point when they have a shared goal of closing Green Bay?
Right, and they have a projected $4.3 billion surplus to work with, but we've already heard from Republicans they want to use about half of that on tax cuts. Now we're hearing they want to use the $2 billion on this prison reform package. So it's going to be interesting how this whole budget rolls out and how much money is allocated to, of course, many priorities that we need to fund here in the state. Another topic this week we want to hit on is big spending in the state Supreme Court race, which we knew was going to get to some big figures. But now when we're looking at how much is spent on advertising and what is reserved for the final weeks of the race, we're looking at now $30 million. Now, the record set in 2023 was $50 million. So right now, kind of on pace to surpassing that. And earlier in the week, it looked like conservatives had a big financial edge over Susan Crawford. Of course, the conservative of the race is Brad Schimmel. But now that's kind of evened out, and it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic changes. But the overall storyline here is that conservatives are much better financially strapped this time around compared to 2023.
What's interesting to change this past week is that Susan Crawford, early in the week, had about $8 million reserved on TV. By the end of the week, she had $13 million reserved. What that tells me is that the state Democratic Party, which can take unlimited contributions from donors and make unlimited transfers to candidates, is still spinning the money wheel right now for Susan Crawford. That's helping a great deal. Why that is key is Brad Schimmel has lots of help from outside groups. Candidates get a better rate on TV than outside groups do. Crawford's dollars go a lot farther than Republicans do. So that's a way if you can close that gap with that spending advantage Republicans have. The second thing going on is it's like billionaire week in the Supreme Court race. So it's like my billionaire is okay, but yours is not. So Susan Crawford doesn't like Elon Musk being involved in the race. Brad Schimmel like George Soros being involved in the race. Really at core, it's about motivating their bases. We're a month out from the election. They're trying to figure out how do I get my voters engaged and want to turn out come April 1st. Well, for Schimmel, George Soros is a boogeyman for conservatives. For Crawford, Elon Musk with the Doge effort. His numbers are not doing very well in polls lately, so he's a motivator for Democrats. So it's really about this point motivating your base to get out the poll April 1st.
And looking ahead to next week, we want to focus on Tuesday, where Republican lawmakers are going to be launching a new audit into the Department of Public Instruction for examining how they implemented these new testing standards that have been facing criticism from both sides of the aisle.
So if you're a cynic like me, You go, wait, April 1st is an election, and this audit's being launched just about a month out from the election. Sure, there's just a coincidence about that. There's already a bill right now, legislature, that's been brought up that would restore the old benchmarks. They're making an issue of this, Republicans are, because they feel like the public is with them, number one. It's a weakness for Underly. So this is going to be another way to highlight that change and put Underly defensive to try and defend why did she make this change. She insists you don't lower the standards. Most people aren't buying that so far that I can tell.
All right, that will do it for this week. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course, you can watch Capital Connection every weekend right here on CBS 58 or over on WMLW-DM. Catch up on all the headlines online as well from what's been going on in Madison. You just go to our website, cbs58.com.